So walk us through this story that you found that Catholic leaders had been warning Tim Walz, of all people, the governor of Minnesota. He ran for vice president just last year. They were warning him about the lack of adequate security at Catholic schools, and he did nothing.
Exactly. So we were paying a lot of attention to these trans identifying school shooters for quite some time now because, as I'm sure you know, Jack, Daily Wire is based in Nashville, where a tragic shooting also took place at Covenant Christian School several years ago. And that shooter also identified as transgender. It was a woman who identified as a guy. She shot and killed a number of students in a really tragic day. And after this shooting took place, there were Catholic school leaders, but also independent school leaders and others based in Minneapolis, Minnesota, who reached out to leaders in Minnesota, specifically Tim Walz, and said, look, we have concerns about serious safety threats in our state. We're seeing a lot of threats to Christian or Jewish or Muslim schools, and we're not covered by the public the state funding that would go into an initiative that Walz was proposing and lawmakers were proposing to protect schools. So they specifically said, please help us. Even though we're not public schools, we still need to protect the kids. We need these safety measures. And they were asking Tim Walz to do this. We found this letter and we reported it last week. And of course, like a good journalist, I reached out to the leaders who sent the letter. One was the leader of the Minnesota Catholic Conference, and the other was the leader of basically independent schools in Minnesota. And I asked them both, were you helped? Did Tim Walz help? Did he show interest in helping protect these really religious schools in the state? And what I found out from both of them was that no, ultimately they were not helped. They said that Tim Walz spoke with them, expressed an interest in protecting kids in these schools because, and you know, who would not want to protect children who are in such a vulnerable position, but ultimately nothing was done. And so finding this letter on the heels of this tragic shooting in Minneapolis, where this gunman slaughtered children as they prayed in a Catholic school mass, as a Catholic, that just, it broke me, Jack, as I'm sure it broke you and many other people across the country who, we know what a sacred space mass is. We know what a sacred space it is for these children who are praying to God and in such a vulnerable position. And so to know that Tim Walz could have done something to help these schools, he knew that they were anxious about security threats and ultimately did not, is a truly devastating thing to learn.
You know, this is crazy because you look at all the rhetoric out of Tim Walz talking about how we need to protect the trans community, protect the Somalian community, our beloved Somalian community here in Minnesota, make sure they're protected from the rhetoric, make sure they're protected from online, these boogeymen, these creatures. He's been running around all weekend saying that President of the United States is having a health issue, by the way. That's where his focus is. They just kind of act like these things don't happen. And yet, in reality, we have a situation where there were leaders of the schools. And by the way, and I was reading your article, there's 72,000 students. And we're talking about independent Catholic, Jewish, Christian, and Muslim nonprofit schools within Minnesota. And they're just not getting this same level of funding, which seems to be something that's like, guys, we could just take the politics out of all of this. This is a public safety issue. There are children involved. I don't see what the political issue is. How is this a partisan thing?
Right. Well, and we know, Jack, that Tim Walz and his wife have a long history of promoting transgender ideology in schools. I
Yes.
wrote about this when he was running with Kamala Harris and took a closer look at some of the things they had pushed. They had very close relationships with younger students who it seems like they really encouraged in their gender dysphoria. There was one story we wrote about them taking a younger student who was struggling with their gender identity to a concert. And, a lot of this has been portrayed as Tim Walz and his wife just being strong advocates in the transgender community. And at the same time that Tim Walz was not helping to protect these schools, the same year, he actually promoted transgenderism even more, making Minnesota, I believe, a trans refuge state. and promoting this idea that gender, when a child is struggling with their gender, it will make them happier and safer and healthier to undergo so-called gender affirming care, which we know and most of the country understands is a lie. That it will not make you happier to go on testosterone or estrogen and pump your body full of foreign hormones, or to undergo very invasive top surgery or bottom surgery, expensive surgeries that will cost you literally an arm and a leg. They will cost you emotionally for years to come, and you will be a hospital patient for the rest of your life. And yet, this is the narrative that's being pushed on these young people. And over again, we're seeing this happen.